Hi, today I thought I would do a little reading wrap up of what I've read in October, and I've read quite a bit this month. I feel like for some reason I always have like an appetite for reading in the fall months than I do in like spring and summer. I'm not sure why. I just feel like maybe I just like to be inside reading a book when it's cold outside, and that happens in the fall and the winter. But anyway, I have read a lot of books in October, and I thought I would just go over them, maybe rank them from least to most favorite, I guess. I didn't like dislike anything I read this month. I feel like I'm choosing books that like I kind of know that like I will like to some extent. But yeah, I guess let's just get into it. I guess I'm gonna rank them. Then in last place, I would put The Pisces by Melissa Broder, which I read really early in the month. And I kind of had high hopes for this one because I've read Melissa Broder's two other novels and I really enjoyed both of them. And this one, I did enjoy it. Like, I think I would give it like a 6 out of 10. Like, it was good. But I think the reason I didn't quite like this one as much is because I think what I liked about her other two books is that she was so like wacky and zany and like funny that it was kind of like shocking in like a funny way. Like, you would kind of read her stuff and like you would do like a double take and you'd be like, did she just write that? And this one is like kind of shocking too. It's about a woman who falls in love with like a merman, but I think the shock kind of fell flat for me and it wasn't as funny as her other books. And I think for some reason it also felt more contained. Like, it didn't feel as maybe as like daring or adventurous as her other two books, which is kind of crazy when you're talking about a book where a woman falls in love with a merman, because I feel like that inherently is like a little crazy. But it just wasn't as, I don't know, just like didn't hit the same as her other ones. But it was still good. I still enjoyed it. And I still would definitely read whatever she puts out next. And I think this is also like the first novel she wrote, so that could be why I like her other ones more. Maybe she's like grown, you know? And then next I would put Mothers and Sons by Adam Haslett, and I read that after. And again, this one was a good book. It follows a middle-aged man who is an immigration lawyer, and he gets assigned this case of this young guy from Albania. And it kind of follows his working of that case and also his own upbringing, and it kind of switches perspectives between him and, or not perspectives because I think it's in the third person, I think, but it switches like stories between him and his mom, and like something happened when he was younger that was never fully like addressed and which he holds like trauma about. And I think for the first half of this book, I wasn't compelled. There's a lot of like lawyer jargon that was really difficult to get into, and I feel like the story didn't really develop in a meaningful way for like a good chunk of it. And I think what also didn't help is that the writing style was just very like bland, I feel like, for lack of a better word. It didn't excite me. I just feel like at the sentence level it was not compelling to me. I feel like it was being written to tell a story rather than like purposefully making like these sentences like nice to read, which isn't like inherently an issue, I guess, because there are books where I feel like that is more important. And also I think that like if you're too focused on the sentences being beautiful and you don't have a larger sense of like the plot, that is like maybe a bigger issue. I just personally, I'm kind of partial to like enjoying what I read at the sentence level, and this didn't really do that for me. However, by the end of the book, I was really invested, and I feel like all the threads were tied together in a really compelling way, and kind of like a sad way too, because it's about like, I think, kind of reconciling your past and your family relationships and how things that happen to you as a child that are traumatic can affect you well later into your life. So it was a good book. I enjoyed it. Okay, then I would put Who Will Run the Frog Hospital by Lori Moore. And I've read 5 Lori Moore books in 2025, which is a little bit of a crazy number, but she is my favorite author, and this was another banger, I have to say. She has yet to like really fully disappoint me with the book, and like I don't think that will happen because now I think I've read almost all of her books. But this tells the story of Barry. I don't know if I'm saying that right because I'm pretty sure she's French. They grew up in upstate New York, like close to the French border, so they all have like French names. But it basically tells her story. It's like 2/3 her life as a child growing up and her relationship with her like best friend, and then like 1/3 her adult life as she's like in Paris on a trip with her husband. And I feel like it does a good job at exemplifying how transformative like childhood friendships are. And I just feel like it's amazing to me that she was like a grown woman when she wrote this, because I feel like she encapsulated like the childhood experience so well, which I guess maybe like isn't hard because we've all had it, but I feel like it's difficult to be so removed from it, like just inherently by like being, I don't know, 20 years removed from it, and being able to reconnect with it so intensely. I think like this was maybe like a little bit of the flip side of the problem that I was saying with the other novel, which is that it was so compelling at the sentence level. Like I think Laura Moore is one of the best like sentence constructors who like has ever written, but sometimes I think she falters like in a whole story. But I didn't feel that too much with this novel, which is good. And I think what I also admire is like the balance between the funny, like the witty, and the devastatingly sad, because it's a very witty book. I think all of Moore's books are pretty witty, but it's also really sad. And like there's this one scene at the end where the main character goes back, when she's like grown up, she goes back to her childhood town to visit her sister, and they have an exchange, and it's just like devastating. And I think her ability to flip so quickly and so intensely between feelings of like humor and nostalgia to like devastation and hopelessness and all that stuff is really commendable and really impressive. And it was really good. I enjoyed it. Okay, Beasts by Joyce Carol Oates. I've never read a Joyce Carol Oates novel, even though I think she's hilarious, mainly because they're like just some things that like circulate on Instagram, and I don't know if they're real, but it's like her retweets of things that like she takes seriously but like are jokes. And maybe that's just because she's like kind of old and doesn't know how to use the internet, but I think they're hilarious, and I'll put some on. They just like make me laugh. But anyway, I've never read any of her novels despite her being, I feel like, pretty prolific. So I liked the cover of this one, and it was used and not too expensive, so I just got it. And it was also pretty slim. It's like a novella, and I really enjoyed it. It was really dark and like, I want to say like sludgy. Like it was so like gothic and like intensely like dark academia, but it's very similar to like The Secret History or like, I don't know, other like dark academia books. And it's about a college girl who has a relationship with her professor and the professor's wife too, and like the dynamic of the three of them and how there's like something sinister about them and kind of her experience in these like 3-4 months of college. And it's kind of dark. There's a lot of manipulation and there's some like abuse and drugging, and it's not the most pleasant story, but I did find her writing very compelling, and the story was so like intense that I like flew through it in like a day. And it's really short. It's only like 120 pages, which I think I already said. Yeah, it kind of just felt like some sort of like hallucination, fever dream, strange, I don't know, but it's good. I recommend it, and I definitely want to read more of her books, so I think I will. Next, I would put the book Isaac by Curtis Garner, and I'd never heard of this author or this book before, but I saw it in the bookstore and I was compelled by the cover because it looked just like very fleshy and interesting. So I picked it up and I read it, and I was really impressed, period. I was really impressed, period. This one tells the story of this 17-year-old guy who kind of falls in love / obsession with this older 28-year-old guy. And I feel like what really interested me about this book is that I feel like it captured very like candidly and honestly what queer culture has kind of been like boiled down to today, while remaining very timeless, I guess, in the way like obsession and love is described. And similarly, like it's not, I would say, a comfortable read because there's obviously the conversation of like power dynamics, you know, when you're reading a love story between a 17-year-old and a 28-year-old, and it takes place in the UK. But it was very compelling and very, I feel like, relatable, even though this is not like an experience I've had. I feel like the way emotions are like portrayed are very universal and relatable. And yeah, I just thought it was very real and cool. And I think it's relatively like not popular, so I definitely recommend checking this one out. The last book I read this month was The Employees by Olga Raven. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it because I believe she's Danish, but this one was also one that I felt compelled to read because of the cover. I just thought it looked very interesting, and it's a kind of experimental novel. It's told in the form of like interview clips of this crew of this flight ship that's like orbiting around space. And it's like a sci-fi book kind of, because there are humans on the ship and then there are humanoids on the ship that aren't really human. And you kind of alternate between the perspectives of these two groups and what they're doing on their ship, and kind of what happens as their mission is kind of eventually deemed like a failure and what happens to them. And I think it was really compelling the way it was told in this form of interview clips. I feel like I don't typically gravitate towards sci-fi, but this one was very like literary in the way it was told. It reminded me a lot of the plot surrounds around the ship containing these like objects, which are these like, if you read it, it's like these like I guess you could describe them as like sculptures or these like kind of alive things. Anyway, it reminded me a lot of this art exhibit I saw called, I think it was called Unruly Objects by Veronica Ryan, and I'll put some pictures on the screen, and maybe this won't make sense unless you've read the book, but just the description of like these like sculptural things reminded me of that. So that is what I thought about that. And yeah, it's kind of, I guess it's kind of like a workplace horror novel, you could also describe it as, because a lot of it surrounds around like the workplace in like this like strange, like demented, twisted way of like this sci-fi workspace that's like in space. I'm saying space a lot. But yeah, it was really good and maybe the best book I've read this month. However, I also am in the middle of reading 10th of December by George Saunders, and I feel like that's a book that I've known I would enjoy for a long time because I just like short stories, and I think George Saunders is similar to a lot of short story authors that I like, and I haven't finished it, so I'm not like gonna officially include it, but I've read half of it and it's been really good. So that might be my favorite once I finish it. But yeah, those are all the books I read this month and my thoughts on them. And I feel like it's been a very fruitful month for good read. So yeah, I hope you check some of these out because they're definitely worth reading.